My name is Emma Smith. I've been married to my husband, David, for almost 14 years. David's younger brother, James, who is 3 years younger than him, still lives with their father. Their mother passed away about 20 years ago. One day, I got the news that my father suddenly collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. I quickly went to the hospital, where my mother and sister had already arrived. They said my father didn't have much time left. A few days later, my father passed away. There was so much to do, arranging the funeral, calling people. Anyone who's been through it knows it's a lot of work. My sister and I decided to take as much pressure off my mom as we could. After all, it was the death of someone she'd been with for so many years. She didn't say it, but I could tell she was trying hard not to trouble us. My brother-in-law also helped. And then the day of the funeral came. That's when something unbelievable happened. My husband didn't show up at all. Neither did my father-in-law or brother-in-law. I was shocked. My husband had sometimes gone fishing with my dad, and we had all gone out to eat together, yet they completely ignored us. I stayed at my mom's house that night, but the next day, I went home and asked David why he didn't come. "Did you come yesterday?" I asked David. "For what?" he answered, scratching his head. "For what?" "My dad's funeral," I said, upset. "I was golfing with a colleague yesterday," he answered, not bothered at all. I couldn't believe it. "Golfing during my father's funeral?" I asked. David just shrugged and said, "So?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't help but think, is this guy really human? "Answer me, David, you should have come," I yelled. David, with a half smile, said, "Why would I go to a funeral for someone I'm not even related to?" I was completely shocked. After 13 years with him, I had never imagined he could say something like this. I felt so disappointed. "And what about your father and James?" I asked. "Well, Dad was probably just relaxing at home. And James, he's busy with a video game," David said casually. "Wait, they didn't come because of that?" I asked. "What do you mean? We're not related," David said. I couldn't understand it. I felt like I was losing control. Even though we hadn't seen my father recently, this was still the funeral of a man who had done so much for us. And, of course, he was my dad. My anger, sadness, and frustration all came out. I'd never felt this way in my life. The next day, I went to my sister's house and told her everything. My brother-in-law was there too. They were just as shocked as I was. It felt good to know I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't wrong. I needed that reassurance. I couldn't forgive my husband, his father, or his brother for not showing respect to my father. Thankfully, my husband and I didn't have any children, so from then on, I found every excuse to avoid my husband's family. I didn't invite them to anything that had to do with my side of the family. I just didn't want them around. From then on, I pretended to be a good wife. David didn't notice anything different. He acted just the same. About 4 years later, the day I had been expecting finally came. It might sound harsh, but David's father passed away. It all started with a sudden phone call from David. Emma, David said quietly. "What's wrong? You sound so down," I asked. "Just brace yourself, it's Dad," David replied. What happened?" I asked, but he didn't respond. I knew something was wrong with my father-in-law, so I quickly packed my things. I had been keeping my things minimal, just in case I had to leave at any moment. My husband started making funeral arrangements, and the news quickly spread to his family and colleagues. I pretended to help, but I didn't go. I didn't help at all. I just left the house we shared, saying I would catch up later. David probably didn't understand what was happening. That night, I went out for dinner with my mom, sister, and her husband. Of course, I told them the funeral was today, and we had a really good time. Meanwhile, David kept calling me. I ignored him. The next day, David called again. "What?" I answered. "What do you mean what? Where are you? And what are you doing?" David asked. "I'm heading to work." "Why?" I replied. "It's my dad's funeral. What are you thinking? Aren't you supposed to help as his daughter-in-law? Don't you think it's strange that you're not there?" David said, confused and angry. David was furious, and I wondered why he was so upset. "Are you home now?" I asked. "So what if I am?" David replied. "Please open the top drawer in the bedroom. We'll talk tomorrow at 10 a.m. I said before hanging up. I had already placed the signed divorce papers and a note in that drawer. The note said where to meet and asked him to please sign. I ignored his next call. The next day, my family, David, my brother-in-law, and I, 6 of us in total, met at the spot. Emma, what the hell are you thinking? David said, already angry. Why didn't you go to the funeral? He yelled. Because we're not blood related, I said. What? What are you talking about? David said. So, if we're not blood related, I don't have to attend the funeral, right? I asked. What are you saying? You're my wife, aren't you? He's my dad. Damn it, David shouted. That's exactly why. Since we're not blood related, I can do what I want, just like you did, I replied. Me? David said. Yes, you. Don't make me remind you. When my father passed away, you were out playing golf, right? And James, you were playing a video game, right? And my father-in-law was lounging around. All three of you. I thought it was strange, but you said it yourself. You didn't come because you're not blood related. So, it's the same thing. Even if my father went fishing with you, even if we all went on a trip with my dad driving, even if he helped us when we were buying a house, or took us out to dinner, it doesn't matter. It's all about being blood related. So, I want to distance myself from you. That's it. Please sign here. I finished speaking. My family listened quietly, like they were supporting me. David's face turned red, and his brother looked down awkwardly. David signed the divorce papers. Now, I just had to submit them. I'll communicate through my lawyer from now on, I added, and with that, the four of us left. 2 weeks later, my lawyer communicated my wishes to my ex-husband. I decided to keep the Porsche my father helped us buy as part of my share of the property. Everything went smoothly after that. David sold our house and paid me back the money he owed me, with a little extra. That was the end of it. My marriage was over. That night, I apologized to my mom in front of my father's altar for taking so long to repay her. I felt guilty for borrowing from them for our sake. My mom just smiled and said, "It's over now, you did well." Wow, what do you think? Marriage isn't just about the couple, right? It involves parents, family, and siblings. It's really a union of two families, but they eventually see each other's true nature. I thought the wife handled everything so calmly. What did you all think? Please leave your comments. We look forward to hearing from you and hope you subscribe to the channel. See you next time, and thanks for watching till the end.